There are many things to be excited about in the county of Worcester because a lot of things are happening. A lot of things are underway to try and address the issues of hunger in Worcester County. And we've tried to play our part here at Worcester State by highlighting what's going on in the community and, in fact, by pinpointing what needs to happen. All of this is in celebration of the 25th anniversary of Worcester County Food Bank. And Jean McMurray, Jean, would you stand, is the executive director of Worcester County Food Bank. And this 25th year is a real important year in the life of the food bank. Not only in celebrating what has been, but in looking forward to what can be. And the mission of the food bank is to help make Worcester County hunger-free. So it's Worcester State College's privilege and joy to be part of that, to jump on that very important initiative. And so we are working hard on that. And it's my pleasure to welcome not only John Orwatt, but Jill DeGillis and Krista Ganella, who are going to share with us from their various perspectives some issues that all weave around hunger, but looking at it today, the high cost of hunger, not only to people who are hungry, but to all of us in the Commonwealth and in the nation. John Orwatt is a colleague of Larry Brown. I happen to have gone to school with Larry, and so when I knew we were doing this forum, I called him up and asked him to come. He had an accident and is not able to be here, but he said, call John, get him to come. I didn't realize John was at Loyola University in Chicago, but nonetheless, I called John and he said yes, and he's come all the way from Chicago to share with us, and he has a very interesting approach to this problem of the cost of hunger, and he is going to share that with you today.
Thank you for inviting me, and also thank the Intergenerational Institute for making this possible. I have to laugh, it took me about an hour to get here from the highway because I have a tendency to get lost. And so my story starts with coming here for the first time 20 years ago, and I asked someone for directions, and they spoke very quickly, and they said, take a left at the White Hen. I'm not sure what White Hen is, but I was looking for a chicken, and I finally got to my destination. But it parallels very nicely with stories from Chicago, where when I first moved to Chicago, people would say, go north on Clark. And how do I know where north is? And they'll say, well, the lake is to your east. And after a couple weeks, you know where the lake is. And you kind of know the lake is to your east, you know where north is, you know where south is. And I think that in driving in Worcester and in Boston, you kind of know where the White Hens are after a while, which are your markers, since the street signs are a challenge to us here. So in the end, it's great to be here, and it's great to be at Worcester State talking about this. This was a great project. This was a great project to work on. There is a fantastic guy to work with, and I worked with Don Shepard on several projects as well as Tim. And so we all have a lot of fun together in our late nights, and usually in hotel rooms in other cities, working on such projects. This is kind of a small group, but I'm wondering kind of who's here. Many of you are students, right? Kind of undergraduate students. Is that true? I think some of you were told you had to come. And there's some folks from the community as well. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And what about faculty or academics or researchers? Are some of you present? Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Well, part of the reason I want to ask that is I encourage you as we go through this is to help me to figure out how we can make this study better, how we can take the next steps in doing this research. What did we miss here? What could we do better? Help to critique this for me. I think that critique is very important in this kind of research, and it helps us to take the next step, to go where we can with the next study. Be kind, because my mother's here and she'll beat you up. So, but I'm only kidding. You don't have to be kind. That's always okay with me. So, but I think larger than that, I think my feeling is oftentimes as a faculty is that our role is not to inculcate information or make people memorize facts. I think our goal is ultimately is how do we kind of think critically, and how do we kind of critique, and how do we understand different ways to answer different kinds of questions. And so that's part of when I say that When you go through this with a critical eye. Give some critique. Let me know the strengths. Let me know the weaknesses. Because that is my passion, is how do we do research and how do we get people to kind of go beyond what the research might say. What we know is that the Department of Agriculture, and I'll talk about each of these points in more detail during this presentation. The first point being is 35 million Americans are hungry and or food insecure in the United States. And that number is calculated by the Department of Agriculture and the Census Bureau on an annual basis. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Our studies show that based on this 35 million Americans who are hungry and are food insecure, hunger costs America about $90 billion. That's about $300 per resident of the U.S. per year, about $800 per household, about $22,000 per person during the course of a lifetime. So the bill's pretty hefty. Most national experts calculate that we can end hunger by expanding current programs by about $10 to $12 billion. So when you kind of look at this analysis, we can say an annual expenditure of $12 billion will help reduce the cost burden of hunger by $90 billion. It's kind of a good deal, it sounds like to me. What we're going to focus on, however, is the middle point. And that's the middle point that I want to focus on throughout today, obviously. And I want to go through how we came across these numbers. Because that should be our first question, is how do you know that? Did you just think about that one day? Did you just make this up? What was your methodology for coming up with that amount? So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these points, which is how do we do cost burden calculations? What do we mean by hunger? How do we define hunger? And what are the assumptions and definitions that we made for this study? Many of us would agree is, what do we mean by hunger? Right? I was hungry yesterday between lunch and supper. Right? Both of my meals were pretty big, and I was hungry. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. So we have to be clear on our definitions. The third thing is looking at the cost of hunger in three areas: charity, illness, and limited learning. And I'll go into each of those and how we kind of came up with different costs for each of those, and then look at the total bill. Well, cost burdens are a compilation, again, of the known economic costs of a problem or a practice. It includes direct and indirect costs, and it uses systematic methods to figure out what those costs are. I'm going to hop ahead a slide for a quick second. I'm going to come back to this, okay? Several cost burden studies have been conducted already. And where we're most familiar are studies having to do with smoking, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, right? Seat belts. What's the cost of alcohol abuse to society? So, did you have an answer? Oh. According to Harwood 2000, which was the most recent study, and I think those are using $1995, it's about $185 billion. Okay? So how do we figure out the cost of alcohol abuse? Well, we're going to want to calculate not just the cost to the person that's abusing alcohol, which could be medical bills, absenteeism, and everything else. We're also going to want to look at what's the cost to society. That person gets into a car accident, hits somebody else. How many people that abuse alcohol are causing car accidents, which are causing a cost to society? So we're looking at private costs, insurance companies, of the other person who lost time at work, and public costs. Okay? Our alcohol treatment system is by and large a public treatment system. You could argue that people churning in and out of the alcohol treatment system, that's an example of public expenditure. We also want to look at the cost to families of alcohol abuse. Children not showing up to school because the parents are trashed and they can't figure out how to get the kid to school. What's the cost of that child's absenteeism? What's the cost of child abuse? So when you look at each of these, smoking is a good example. What we can do is we evaluate, okay, what is the annual cost that we can estimate in the most conservative way possible? Because we don't want to go too nuts. We want to be able to justify our numbers. So based on the literature, based on the research we have available to us, what is the cost that we can identify for alcohol abuse?